In today's video, I need you to stay with me until the very last moment, because what you're about to hear is one of the most emotionally complicated, confusing, and deeply human stories we've ever shared on this channel. This isn't a story about scandal or shock value. It's a story about grief, about the invisible lines we cross without meaning to, about emotional dependence, and about how love, even the safest kind, can become dangerous when two broken people lean on each other too heavily. If this is your first time here, kindly hit the subscribe button and tap the notification bell so you never miss our daily uploads. And to all our regular listeners, thank you for always showing up. You make this community what it is now. Let's get into the full story. My name is Patricia and I'm 24 years old. And the truth is, I've been avoiding telling this story for months. Not because it's scandalous, it isn't. Not because it's dramatic, though it is. But because I still don't fully understand the part I played in it. Or the part my father played. Or the part grief played in reshaping both of us into people we almost didn't recognize. I've deleted this recording more times than I can count. Even now, my hands shake every time I press record. Not out of shame, not out of fear, but because this story forces me to admit something I never wanted to say out loud. You can betray yourself without ever breaking a rule. You can hurt someone without ever doing anything wrong. And you can cross a line without even realizing you were standing on one. Let me start with the thing that broke us long before anything else did. My mother's death. She passed away 8 months ago. Cancer. The kind that drains a person slowly, then suddenly, then completely. The kind that steals more than a life. It steals laughter, warmth, the smell of home, the sense that the world makes sense. My father. I watched him go from the strongest man I knew to a man held together by memories and fatigue. A man who slept on the couch because the bed was too empty. A man who forgot to eat, forgot to shave. Forgot that he was allowed to keep living. After the funeral, people did what people always do. They showed up with food, hugs, cliches, and soft prayers. And then they left. One by one. Until it was just me and him and a house full of ghosts. I moved back into the house 3 days later. It wasn't planned. I packed a bag, drove across town, and never left again. He didn't ask me to stay. He wasn't capable of asking for anything. But he looked at me the night I walked in with this hollow expression that said, "Please don't leave me alone with this pain." So I stayed. The first weeks were survival. Not healing, just surviving. I woke up early to cook breakfast. Even though neither of us had an appetite, I cleaned the kitchen, paid bills, checked mail, turned on lights in the house because the darkness made him withdraw even further. And at night, I'd hear him crying through the walls. Not loud, not dramatic, just broken, silent. Like a man trying to grieve without disturbing the world. It tore something in me I didn't know existed. Because that sound, my father's quiet pain, made me want to run to him. To hold him, to make it stop. To be whatever he needed me to be. And that is where the first line began to blur. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I left my room in the middle of the night. Walked down the hallway barefoot. Opened his door without knocking. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding a picture of my mother. His shoulders slumped forward. His hair messy. His eyes swollen and red. He didn't even look up when I entered. For a moment, I stood there. Not as his daughter, but as someone who recognized another human being drowning in pain. I walked over and wrapped my arms around him from behind. He stiffened. Then collapsed into the embrace like he had been waiting for someone to catch him. He turned and pulled me into a hug, the same kind he used to give me when I was little. Except this time, it didn't feel like comfort. It felt like we were two shattered pieces trying to hold each other together. We didn't speak for a long time. The room was filled with grief too heavy for words. Eventually, I whispered, "I miss her too." And he broke down again. I stayed in his room that night. But let me be clear. Nothing inappropriate happened. Nothing physical. Nothing romantic. Nothing crossed. I slept beside him because he couldn't sleep alone. I stayed because I didn't want him to wake up to an empty room. I stayed because grief makes you do things that make sense only in the moment, collapse under analysis later. But that night changed us. Not in the way strangers on the internet might assume, but in a way far more complicated. We became each other's emotional oxygen, and that is dangerous. Over the next weeks, new routines formed. We talked more. We spent evenings on the porch watching the sunset, something my parents used to do together. He told me stories about my mother I had never heard before. The way she laughed at her own jokes. The first time she burned dinner while cooking for him. The night he proposed, and while he spoke, I saw a man who wasn't just my father. He was a husband who had lost the love of his life. A partner who didn't know who he was without her. A man grieving in slow motion. The more he opened up, the closer we became. Closer than we had ever been. Closer than a father and daughter should be emotionally. Not physically, not romantically, but emotionally, deeply, dangerously emotionally, because I became the place he put all his hurt, all his fear, all his loneliness, and he became the only safe place I had left. Then one evening, it happened, not the thing you're probably imagining, not something scandalous, not something inappropriate, but something that changed everything. It was raining that night, the kind of soft, steady rain that makes silence feel deeper. We were watching one of my mother's favorite movies. Halfway through, I started crying. Not because of the movie, but because of her. Because of the life I had before all this. Because of everything we had lost. He wrapped his arm around me the way he used to when I was a child, but his hand lingered a little longer than usual. Not in a wrong way, but in a way that said something unspoken was happening between us. He looked down at me, eyes full of something I couldn't name. Not romantic. Not wrong, but too intimate. Too dependent, too. Needy, and I looked back. For a split second, we weren't father and daughter. We were two exhausted, broken people clinging to the only other person who understood their grief. That moment, that single, quiet moment was the line. Because in that moment, I realized something terrifying. If I kept letting myself be his emotional replacement for my mother, I was going to lose myself, and if he kept leaning on me the way he was going to lose himself too. But I didn't say anything that night. Neither did he. We pretended the moment didn't happen, but after that, things weren't the same. He depended on me for everything. Not physically, emotionally. He asked me for advice on what to cook, what to wear. He couldn't sleep unless he heard me moving around the house. He waited for me to come home from work like a child waits for a parent. He stopped reaching out to friends, stopped going to grief counseling, stopped trying to function without me and me. I let it happen. Because part of me liked being needed. Part of me liked feeling important. Part of me felt like taking care of him was the only way I could keep my mother alive. But another part of me, a quiet, scared part, knew I was stepping into a role I wasn't meant to fill. I wasn't supposed to be his emotional anchor, his emotional spouse, his replacement for the woman he lost. No boundaries were physically crossed. But emotionally, we were tangled in ways that could destroy us both. The breaking point came on a Wednesday night. We were folding laundry, a simple, slow, quiet routine. No tension, no drama, just chores. But out of nowhere, he said softly, "I don't know what I'd do without you." The way he said it, the weight behind it, hit me like a punch. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't appreciation. It was dependence. The kind that becomes unhealthy. The kind that becomes consuming. The kind that traps both people. I looked at him and asked, "Dad, what are we doing? This isn't normal, is it?" He froze, shirt still in his hands. His eyes softened. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Then finally he whispered, "I don't know. I don't know how to be alone, and I don't know how to stop needing you. But I know this isn't fair to you." He looked like a man who had just realized he was leaning on a crutch that wasn't built to hold that much weight. And I realized I wasn't just betraying myself. I was betraying him too, because I was letting him depend on me in a way that wasn't healthy for either of us. We sat there in silence, Not angry. Not ashamed. Just. Lost. That night, I went to my room and cried harder than I had cried since my mother died. Not because I did something wrong. Not because he did something wrong. But because grief had tricked us into becoming versions of ourselves we didn't recognize. I wasn't his daughter anymore. I wasn't his child. I wasn't his equal. I was his lifeline, his emotional replacement, his other half, not romantically, not physically, but psychologically. And that is a line you never want to cross with a parent. Not because it's wrong, but because it destroys both of you. The next morning, I told him I was moving out. His reaction broke me. He didn't yell. He didn't beg. He didn't blame me. He just nodded slowly and whispered, "I think that's what we both need." And it was. Not because I didn't love him, but because I loved him too much to let him collapse